Hi guys, good morning everyone. How is everyone today? I hope you all are doing fine. We have just finished our periodic test and today we will be starting a new volume, that is volume 2. We will be doing the tale of Peter Rabbit. Now I'm quite sure most of you must be knowing who is Peter Rabbit. There are cartoons about Peter Rabbit. There is also a movie. So anyways, in case you have not seen the movie, no problem. We will be reading the story in the book. And for those of you who have seen the movie, that's really good. So today's topic is the tale of Peter Rabbit. And in today's topic, we will focus on the elements of a fiction story. So before we move on, let me ask you the question, what is a fiction story? Okay, so remember, in a fiction story, it is not a real story. A fiction story is not a real story. In a fiction story, you would have imaginary characters, okay, characters who would speak and do things that usually animals do not. The setting would also be imaginary, okay, it would not be real. In very simple terms, a fiction story is not a real story. So let's move to the next slide. Now in the next slide, you can see over here we have some fiction and non-fiction books. Now if you see the Lorax, this is a fiction story. It is not true, okay, it is a imaginary story. I don't know if you have watched it, but it does come on the movie sometimes. We have even Charlotte's Web. Again over here we have a girl and we have a pig. We have also got some spiders, a spider and some animals, and these animals talk. So in real life, you would find that these animals cannot talk, right? So this is a fiction story. In the Lorax also, we have imaginary kind of creatures who talk. So again, this is not possible. So this is a fiction story. But if you see on the right side, planets. Now this is a non-fiction book because it is about planets. Planets exist, okay? They talk about facts. I want to be a veterinarian. Again over here, this is something which you will be able to relate to for those of you who want to become a veterinarian. So this is again a non-fiction book because it states facts on how we should become a veterinarian or what you should do to help animals when you become a veterinarian. And next is a book of Helen Keller. Now this is also a lesson which is included in your Exceed textbook. We will be doing this later on, and this is also a non-fiction because it tells us about the life of Helen Keller. Okay, so these are just some examples of fiction and non-fiction books. Now let us see, if I tell you to identify a fiction book and a non-fiction book, what are the points you need to keep in mind to identify these books? So let's take a look. Now, in fiction, okay, remember the story is not real. As I already told you, it is made up, okay, it is just story talk. You read it just to enjoy it. Okay, we always read fiction books in order because if you do not read it in order, you would not come to know the story. It has illustrations, means pictures are not of real human beings. Okay, they are drawn. We have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You have characters and you have settings, and we also have problems and solutions. So these are the points you need to keep in mind when you are asked whether a certain book is a fiction book or a non-fiction book. Now in a non-fiction book, you would find that the stories are real. Okay, they talk about facts. We read non-fiction books because we want to learn something or we want to be inspired by them. Okay, we read it in any order. A non-fiction book can be read in any order. Okay, you would find photos of real people, you would find charts, you would find graphs. Okay, there is also a table of contents. You will have the index, the glossary. Okay, you will have bold words, you will have labels and true information. Okay, remember, non-fiction books always have true information. So over here I've given you two books. The first one is Peter Rabbit. Now in Peter Rabbit, we know that the story is not real. Check. We know that it is a story. Check. We are reading it to enjoy. Check. We need to read it in order. Check. Illustrations. These are illustrations. They are not real pictures. Okay. Check. It has a beginning, middle, and an end. Check. We have characters, okay, which I'll be discussing later. We have a setting. We got a problem, and we also have a solution. Okay, now if you take the picture book of Helen Keller, this is a real story about a little girl who could not see and hear. Okay, we have it talks about facts. Okay, we read it because we want to learn about her. We read it because we want to be inspired. Okay, we can read it in any order. Okay, but usually it's always better to read it from the beginning, but you can read it in any order. It has photographs of the real person. Okay, it has pictures also of the books which she read. You will have a table of contents. Okay, if you see in your volume 3, you will find the story. You have an index, a glossary, okay, bold words, labels, okay, and true information. The book contains true information. So this is your difference between fiction and non-fiction. So I hope you have understood what is fiction books and what are non-fiction books. Okay, now coming back to a story, The Tale of Peter Rabbit, I want you to stop here. Okay, I want you to pause the video over here and go to your textbook and read the entire story. Now I cannot read it with you over here because it would take a lot of time, so I want you to go and read the story and then come back and continue the video. Now, hoping that you have read the story, okay, we are coming back to the video. Okay, now let's discuss the elements of a story. Every story has elements, okay, and we will be discussing the elements in this chapter. So over here we have the first thing any story has is the characters, right? So over here we have got Flopsy, we have Mopsy, Cottontail, Peter and their mother. All these characters are rabbits. Okay, and we have a man known as Mr. McGregor. Okay, so we have Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, okay, Peter and the mother. Okay, and we have a man who is Mr. McGregor. Clear? And we have the rabbits over here. All the characters are rabbits. They are imaginary because rabbits cannot talk. Okay, over here you would find the rabbits talking and doing very, very naughty things. Okay, the setting is in Mr. McGregor's vegetable garden. Okay, so this is where the story is set. The problem, okay, what is the problem over here? The problem is that Peter is a very naughty rabbit. He never listens to his mother and he always goes to Mr. McGregor's garden and he takes vegetables from Mr. McGregor's garden without asking him, and this makes him very, very angry. Imagine that you have a beautiful garden full of fresh vegetables, and if a rabbit comes and starts eating up your vegetables, how would you like? You would be angry, right? You would want to catch and do something to the rabbit. So the same way Mr. McGregor gets angry with Peter, okay, because Peter always goes to his garden and starts stealing all his vegetables. Okay, now in the rising action, okay, we would find that Peter is being chased by Mr. McGregor. Peter goes into the garden, Mr. McGregor comes to know, and Mr. McGregor starts chasing Peter. Okay, Peter gets very scared. He hides in a pot. If you read the story, you'll come to know this. Okay, and finally he manages to escape. Okay, so your rising action is where Peter is being chased by Mr. McGregor around his garden and his shed. Okay, this is a very dangerous thing. Peter could have been killed. Peter could have been caught. Okay, the climax is the most exciting part of the story. Okay, this is where the problem is solved. Over here you find that Peter escapes from the garden. Okay, even though he is very tired and he's sick, he reaches home, he's tired, he's sick, but he is so happy to be with his family. You will find a change in Peter over here. From being the very naughty person or naughty rabbit he is, he changes into a more matured rabbit. Okay, so every story has these elements. These are the most common ones which we are discussing today. Okay, now let's move to the next slide. Okay, now in the introduction of the lesson, as I have already told you in the Golden Goose and the Torch, we usually meet the characters in the introduction, right? That is the beginning. Okay, so in the introduction we meet the characters, we see the setting. So over here our characters are Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, Peter, okay, Peter's mother, and Mr. McGregor. Okay, so we meet the characters and we see the setting. The setting is in Mr. McGregor's garden. This is a pic of the movie. If you ever get time, you should watch the movie. It's really nice. Okay, and the problem happens with the main character over here. We know that the problem is that Peter always steals vegetables from Mr. McGregor's garden, and that is why Mr. McGregor gets angry. Okay, the rising action, okay, over here, what is rising action? So rising action is when problems, okay, when things related to the problem happen. Now Peter goes and he robs from the garden. So finally, that's your problem. Now Mr. McGregor sees him, he starts chasing him. Okay, so these are things that are related to the problem. So over here, the character tries to solve the problem. Over here, Peter is trying to escape and he's trying to solve the problem. He does various things, right? He hides in the pot. Okay, he starts thinking of the best way to escape. Okay, so this is your rising action. In the climax, remember, the problem is solved. Over here, Peter escapes from under the fence. Okay, we find that he changes from being a very naughty, irresponsible bunny. He changes into a little responsible one. He has a talk with his mother. Okay, and we find the happy ending. So this is your climax. Okay, so this is all about Peter Rabbit. Now for your S1 homework in S1, you will also find elements of a fiction story. The elements are given and you need to match it with the correct answer. Okay, it's very easy. If you have any doubts, you can always ask me. In question number 2, you need to use the elements. Okay, so just write them in order in question number 2. Okay, the choices which are given in B, if you can see in B, okay, the choices which are given, you need to just write it in order and you will form a summary. Okay, when you write all the choices in order, do not leave any gaps. You would find that you have written a summary of the story. Okay, and the third one is that you need to write one difference between a fiction and a non-fiction story, which I have already discussed. Okay, you can write any point from slide. Okay, you can write any point. Clear? So that's all for today. In case you have any doubts, feel free to message me or give me a call. Okay, and stay safe. I hope everyone is staying safe, taking a lots of precaution. Okay, not going out anywhere, right? So stay safe and happy learning. Bye. We'll meet you in your next class.